It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, Professor Peter Klinken, the newly appointed Chief Scientist for Western Australia, who will speak on the topic Science and Industries of the Future. Peter is a UWA graduate and therefore a member of Convocation, having graduated with a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Western Australia in 1982. Between 1984 and 1986, he was a Fogarty International Fellow at the US National Institutes of Health in Washington, and from there he returned to work at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute in Melbourne as an NH and MRC postdoctoral fellow between 1987 and 1988. In 1989, he became lecturer in biochemistry at the University of Western Australia before being appointed Professor in Clinical Biochemistry in 1994. Between 2000 and 2002, he was the Director of Research at Royal Perth Hospital. In 1998, he played a key role in establishing the state's premier adult medical research institute, the Western Australian Institute for Medical Research, now known as the Harry Perkins Institute of Medical Research. Under his stewardship, the institute attracted world-class national and international researchers to the state and made many acclaimed medical discoveries. I had the pleasure of working with Peter when my firm, Haim Charlie, was appointed as the architects for his vision of developing two new state-of-the-art medical research facilities, one located on the QE2 Medical Centre campus in Nedlands and the other on the Fiona Stanley Hospital campus in Murdoch, which will house more than 800 researchers. Professor Klinken is a highly regarded medical researcher, known particularly for his work advancing the understanding of genes involved in leukaemia, cancer and anemia, and for his many research achievements, including the discovery of a gene that suppresses the growth of tumours. Please welcome Professor Peter Klinken.
Thank you, Warren. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great honour for me to be here at what is an ordinary meeting. I hate to see one of your extraordinary meetings. A couple of weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to attend the very first international meeting of chief scientists in New Zealand. There were 200 chief scientists. Can you imagine 200 chiefs in a dirty great big wigwam? It was a serious powwow from 47 different countries. But what struck me very, very markedly was that the New Zealanders, when they got up and did a presentation, introduced their talks with a statement in Maori. So please indulge me for 1 second. Kaya nunakot, ninja wajak, ninja buja. What I've tried to say, I think, if I've got it right, was to say, hello everybody. This is Noongar land, and in particular, land of the Wajak people. I acknowledge that they are the spiritual custodians of this land, and I acknowledge their elders, past and present, and I thank my coach, Jason Barrow from Kurungkul Karajin, for teaching me those words. So, to be honest, I actually made a mistake. I'll try it again. I did make a mistake. I should have gone Kaya Nunakot. That's hello everybody. Nija Wajak Noongar Buja, which is this is the land of the Noongar people, specifically the Wajak people. So, having got that right the second time around, can we edit can we do a bloopers cut from that? Thank you. Let me tell you a little bit about my role as Chief Scientist. I have to say I was quite gobsmacked to be approached by the Premier to take on this role, but it has been a privilege and an honour for me to take it on. I am an independent advisor to government, and in particular to the Premier, who is the Minister for Science. My role is to provide advice on scientific matters when asked, but also I'm allowed to make suggestions, provide advice when I have made observations of my own. I also chair some subcommittees, committees such as the Premier Science Awards and the Premier's Fellowships. So it's been a remarkable whirlwind of 3 months to find out what this job entailed and how I can make a small contribution to the future of this great state of ours. Over the past 3 months, I have had the pleasure of going around and meeting numerous ministers whose portfolios have encompassed some aspects of science. I've had the privilege of meeting government bureaucrats, department heads, university heads, organisations involved in science, in industry, and individuals who've got a passion about science. It's just been an absolute joy for me to go out and meet these people and to hear their stories and to find out about the wonderful work that is actually being conducted in this state. So, what are the key areas? What are the strengths of research and science in Western Australia? So there is a draft science policy that has been prepared and is under consideration at the moment, and it identifies 5 key areas of scientific endeavour where Western Australia has particular strengths. These are, first of all, oil and gas and mining, and that's a no-brainer. Right? This state has done remarkably well out of its ability to extract benefits from the resources. These are incredible engineering feats, but what really excites me is the next generation that's coming through beyond our current extraction, such as our ability to remotely drive mines, machinery and trains. That's cutting-edge technology. I was at the Rio Tinto facility near the airport recently, where they're running their mines in the northwest, 1,500 kilometres away, by a group of people in a room no larger than this. That's stunning. Stunning technology. We also have the capability to do some fabulous work on offshore oil and gas. Western Australia will be a leading centre on this planet in oil and gas for offshore drilling. The second area that we've identified as a key strength in Western Australia revolves around radio astronomy and the square kilometre array. And I really, really like this one because 10 years ago, not many people would have thought of Western Australia as a centre of excellence in radio astronomy. Fortunately, there were some scientists in CSIRO who had heard through the grapevine, through the international grapevine, that there was the possibility of this massive project called the Square Kilometre Array. They looked around to see how Australia could contribute and identified Western Australia as the place to be. This state made a couple of critical decisions, namely to make key appointments and to recruit world leaders to Western Australia. And the consequence of that is that we have the world's largest radio astronomy project on our doorstep. It shows where there was a need, horizon scanning, a vision and an implementation that we can actually do some spectacular things. I like this as a paradigm going forward. We need to be astute, we need to be aware of what's around and to seize opportunities when we can. The Square Kilometre Array speaks volumes to me on that. The third area of strength in Western Australia that's been identified is in biodiversity and marine science. I'm not sure if you're all aware, but listening to some of the comments, the questions that were raised earlier, that some people are certainly aware that Western Australia is a biodiversity hotspot. I was unaware that it is the second hottest spot on the planet for aquatic biodiversity. And I was told that most of that aquatic biodiversity takes place 20 kilometres west of Rottnest. So basically on our doorstep. The confluence of the warm Lewin current with Antarctic cold currents swirls around just off our doorstep, and we have this fabulous confluence of biodiversity. Now, I think it's fantastic that what we're doing is cataloguing and making sure we identify all of our biodiversity and making sure we replace it when we've had a mine or whatever go through. But my personal view is that we should be exploring ways of extracting value out of our biota. If this was a geological survey that was conducted over Western Australia, and we could identify a potential gold mine, a potential oil seam, or a potential nickel mine, people would invest and say, we've got to go and look at those opportunities. That's part of our geological heritage. I believe that our biological resources are equally important. Having worked as a consultant for a pharmaceutical company in Victoria, I became well aware of what's called natural product screening, where you can actually use unusual organisms, new biodiversity, undescribed biodiversity, and try and extract compounds from them to try and identify a new antibiotic, a new anti-cancer agent, or whatever. I believe that our biodiversity is a resource that we should be looking to extract value from. It also then allows us to move into new industries. This would link up Western Australia with the fledgling biotechnology, pharmaceutical industry, clinical trials, and so on. There's a wonderful opportunity for this state, I believe. The fourth key area that's been identified is in agriculture. Once again, that's a bit of a no-brainer, right? The state has done extraordinarily well, especially in dryland farming. We have amazing capacity to produce products, and the quality of the products that are produced from Western Australia are quite outstanding. Into the future, our agricultural system has wonderful opportunities, but equally there are challenges that the agricultural sector faces with decreasing rainfall, increased salinity, biosecurity, and so on. Now, all of these challenges will only be met, addressed, and answered through solid scientific approaches. And the fifth key area that's been identified is in medical research. Now, the state has quite a proud record in medical research, but I'm not sure if you're aware that successive state governments have invested $7 billion in hospitals and health infrastructure. That's $7,000 million into the health sectors, just for infrastructure. This will see us well into the mid part of this century. That's a serious investment. It has also enabled the creation of some fantastic new campuses, which are bringing hospitals, universities, particularly UWA, and medical research institutes into much closer proximity, working together for the benefit of the community. Western Australia also boasts some of the best health records internationally. We can utilise these extremely well to our benefit. Western Australia also has some wonderful history through the Busselton Survey and the RAIN study. These are longitudinal studies that have been going for 21 years, I think, for the RAIN study, and well, mid-60s is when the Busselton study started. Phenomenal longitudinal studies that many people, many nations would envy. So there are 5 clear categories that have been identified for Western Australia. I would actually like to see the approach taken as a matrix where underlying or underpinning technologies link those different sectors. Most importantly for me is that the Square Kilometre Array will bring one of the largest supercomputers to Western Australia in the next few years. We'll have probably one of the 3 largest supercomputers based around the Square Kilometre Array. That'll allow every one of the sectors that I've mentioned access to supercomputing grunt that'll enable huge data to be analysed incredibly quickly. On the biological side of things, there were 3 areas: biodiversity, health and agriculture. And I see those underpinned by technologies in what are called the omics capabilities. Genomics, for example, the ability to analyse all the genes. Proteomics, the ability to analyse all the proteins. Metabolomics, the ability to analyse all metabolites. Those technologies are the same across those three different areas. So I'm seeing technology driving different groups together so that we now have new opportunities, new discoveries, new ways of thinking that we wouldn't have thought of before. I think this is a very exciting time for Western Australia, and this confluence of technologies is going to be vital for the way we go forward. This university is a key engine room for science in this state. I think Paul might have seen my notes when he spoke earlier, so I'll have to cut my talk down by half. But suffice to say that I've had the pleasure of visiting some of the world-leading groups housed here in the university. For example, the Centre for Plant Energy Biology. That is a spectacular centre, led by Harvey Miller, Ian Small, Ryan Lister, outstanding research talent. We have ICRA, the International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research, led by Peter Quinn. The Oceans Institute, Sean Collins. These are internationally outstanding centres of excellence. And the university's ranking of 88, I think, is a testament to its international standing, and we look forward to the university moving on that upward trajectory towards the goal of being a top 50 university by 2050. I think it's achievable, but I think it's more than achievable. It actually has to happen. It has to happen for the good of Western Australia. So if I have a dream, and it's something that I shared with Warren over lunch just after I was appointed as Chief Scientist, it is to see Perth in particular become a city of creativity and innovation. I would love to see this place a hub of creativity where there's a buzz of excitement and enthusiasm and a whole bunch of ideas coming out. To me, it's very simple. Innovation requires bright ideas. Who provides the bright ideas? Bright people. How do you attract the bright people? Well, I think you need to have an environment that is incredibly attractive to bright people. So that would involve a creative scene that has a flourishing music, arts, culture, food, wine, and science. These are all creative disciplines, and they require creative minds that are exploring all sorts of new avenues. I think Western Australia, and in particular Perth, is poised right now to move into that area, to move into a city, a bit like our sister cities, San Diego and Houston, to move into that space of being a centre of creativity and excitement. If I can just go back one step to San Diego, when I was in the States in the mid-80s, San Diego was a place where folk went to retire. It housed the American 7th Fleet, and that was it. San Diego now is the third largest biotechnology hub on the planet. There has been a monumental shift in that city, and I think there's a lot we can learn. So you can call me biased, but I think Western Australia in particular, Perth's a wonderful place to live. We have terrific climate, it's a safe place, generally tolerant people, and generally. I just think that now is our time. We have a wonderful opportunity to make this city something special. There's been massive investment in infrastructure, as I mentioned, and these are what I call the physical environment. Buildings, world-class universities, hospitals that say, you know what, this place is investing in the future. We now have the physical environment to make it work. What I would like to see is go to the next level and talk about the emotional environment to make it work. how do we create a culture that really supports and promotes creativity and values innovation? I've got a couple of suggestions. Researchers and scientists, because that's the area that I'm in, and as chief scientist, that's my role, like to feel valued. They like to feel that they're part of a community and that they're valued. So we need to tell them that when they go exploring, and research is a journey of exploration, full of uncertainty and pitfalls, that we value them and we support them. One of the joys of research is seeing something that no one else on this planet has ever seen before. When you make a new discovery, you are seeing something that no one else has seen before. That is a rare privilege. That is a rare privilege. But equally, scientists have a responsibility to the community that they serve. I would like to think that we can encourage our young researchers, support their careers, and encourage them to ask big questions. But to ask big questions, you've got to take some risks. So I would promote the idea that they have the James Cook approach to research rather than the Matthew Flinders approach. By that I mean, James Cook went out in search of a continent, the Great Southland. He sailed out into the ocean, looking for a continent. Matthew Flinders, conversely, fine mapped a continent that was already discovered. To me, too much of Australian science is involved in risk-averse, fine mapping, incremental, small improvements, and not enough continent hunting. We need to encourage our bright people to ask the big question, take the risk, and support them when it doesn't come off. Because with risk, there is failure. But we learn from failure. We learn from failure. We shouldn't see that as an impediment. We also need to teach our young researchers, because they are our future, as we heard earlier. The young, bright people are the future of this state, this nation, and this planet. We need to teach them that when they ask a big question, it is not necessarily a clear, linear path from question to answer. We need to teach them not to have a blinkered view, so that if they come across something serendipitously, they actually explore that and go, wow, that's cool. I never thought of that. Instead of going, oh, God, that, don't want to go there. That is not along my path to the end. I think the best example from Western Australia's perspective of looking at data critically and evaluating it critically and challenging the dogma, the current dogma of the time, comes from our Nobel laureates, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren. Stomach ulcers is caused by stress. Well, they looked down the microscope and saw what looked like bacteria in there. Not only did they think they saw bacteria, but they actually managed to culture bacteria. The dogma of the time said bacteria will not grow in the acidic environment of the stomach. Well, guess what? They proved them wrong. And guess what? They were able to find a solution which was incredibly simple. Bacteria, treat them with antibiotics. You don't need surgery. They didn't have an unblinkered view to the data that they were seeing. So once again, serendipity, an open mind is crucial to encouraging our young scientists of the future. And speaking of our Nobel laureates, how many people here know the other Nobel Prize winners that Australia's won? A couple. Well done, Alex. Professor of Medicine, I'm glad you know that. I raised the question in 1998 when, on this campus, when we launched the Western Australian Institute for Medical Research. It was a week when Peter Matera had done his hamstring. Chris Mainwaring was not likely to play because he had a shoulder injury, and everyone knew what was going on in the football world. Probably about this time of the year, actually. And everyone knew our sporting superstars. And I raised the same question. How many in the audience know Australia's research or scientific superstars? I think that's an indictment. They are the people who have had a powerful, palpable influence on our lives, and we don't really recognise them. Fortunately, in Western Australia, we're a little bit different. Right? It's not bad being the most isolated city in the world. We can be a little bit different at times. We've recognised our Nobel laureates. We've recognised Fiona Stanley. We've recognised Fiona Wood. We've recognised Ralph Martins. We've recognised Bruce Robinson. That's not bad, just over the last 10 or 15 years. Right? So some of our research luminaries are being recognised. I think there are a whole cohort of researchers that we don't know about who are having wonderful influences on our lives. So I know that I am between you and your dinner, so I'll wrap that. I can actually hear the stomachs rumbling. Sorry, that's just mine. I'll just wrap up very quickly here and say it's really important that government understands the role of science and the powerful role that it plays in society. But equally, I think it is incumbent upon scientists to explain what they do to policymakers in simple terms. Too many times I've heard the statement that research is a black hole into which money gets poured and there are no tangible benefits. And what that tells me is that scientists and researchers have not been able to explain convincingly to policymakers and government what they do. So I think we need to lift our game. I think it's incumbent upon us to explain what we do. Likewise, I think it's absolutely essential for scientists to communicate much better with the community. Explain what you do to the community and they will come along as your passionate advocates. A few years ago there was a campaign called that Discoveries Needs Dollars when there were potential cuts to the NHMRC budget. And it was quite remarkable how the community came out and supported medical researchers. They were in the streets with the white-coated nerds, the researchers, like me, saying, this is important, we value medical research, it gives us hope. I think other aspects of science need to do the same thing and engage the community so that they become passionate advocates for the sector. So in summary, I think Western Australia is uniquely poised right now to make a transition in science and technology. We've benefited enormously from the resources boom. I'm not sure if you're allowed to call it a resources boom, but we had a wonderful time when things went extremely well, right? We're now looking at the next generation. What are the industries of the future? I've mentioned to you some of the key areas of science that the state has got great strengths in. This is our moment. This is where we actually have to decide whether we're going to invest and start to look at the new opportunities. If not, I think future generations will look back on us and say, what were those guys doing? Were they asleep at the wheel when they had this wonderful opportunity to make a major transition and take the state into a new era? On that note, I'd like to say thank you, and I'll take questions if necessary.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think your overview of the new portfolio demonstrates that Western Australia is very well placed with your enthusiasm and the passion for the role, and I think an excellent selection, and we wish you all the best with that. Peter has kindly offered to join us for a drink and a nibble afterwards, and I'm sure he'd be welcome any questions at that time. I have been reminded by my council colleagues that as we have a full house tonight, we need to keep to time for the catering staff who are here this evening. So I'll now formally close the proceedings and thank you for attending this secondary ordinary meeting. But before doing that, I'd like to certainly thank Peter for his contribution to that, his overview of his portfolio, and present him with a small gift and a token of our esteem this evening.
Thank you very much, Warren. I'm assuming this is a red wine which has resveratrol in it, which is good for your heart. Okay, it's for medicinal purposes only.
I can report that our Convocation officer actually rang to have a discussion with me about the medicinal aspects of wine and whether Professor Klinken would actually like to imbibe that particular wine. So there's a lot of research that's gone into that, Peter. It's now my pleasure to formally close these proceedings. I look forward to keeping you up to date with developments before our next ordinary meeting, which occurs in March next year. I'd like to thank Tracy Taylor, the convener of our Outreach Committee, as well as Juanita Perez in the Convocation Office for all their efforts in organising this meeting. Drinks and supper are now served outside the auditorium. Please stay and catch up with friends and colleagues. Thank you very much again for coming. Good evening. The football scores are 63 to 83. In the final quarter. Who?
North Melbourne are in front.
North Melbourne are in front. That was the final query.